everyone, welcome to Catch and Shoot 2.0 Quick Hitter. Today, it's all about the NBA draft, and we're looking at the top 3 players in this year's draft, and we tell you where they may fit best. Every team is optimistic, right? Especially those teams that reside within the lottery. And if there's one thing that we've learned over the last few years, or really over the last decade, is that you can find a gem in the middle of the lottery. And so that is what so many teams will seek out on Wednesday night, hoping that they find their Giannis Antetokounmpo at 13, or they find their lottery ticket in the middle of the first round. Will it happen? We don't know. Could it happen? It's very possible. But we do have someone who is a pseudo expert on this, who's talked about the NBA draft, who has really kind of dove in deep into some of these prospects, and he's going to know a lot more about them than you and I do. And that is Daniel Kaufman of Pure Hoops Media. Dan, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us. How's it going, man?
It's good. Thank you for having me. I'm psyched to talk shop with you guys. The draft is probably my favorite day of the whole NBA calendar, so I'm psyched to get that and free agency starting in the same week. That might be too much for me. You'll have to check it. But yeah, I can't wait. I think the off season is arguably even more fun than the regular season.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm psyched. So yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about the NBA draft. A lot of people, based off the things that I've read, based off the things that I've watched, you look at this draft as a whole, and people will say it's a little top heavy at 1, 2, and 3. Most NBA drafts are, but a lot of people also say that there's not a bona fide NBA star. When you look at maybe the top 5 or the top 3 prospects in this draft, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say top heavy. I almost am inclined to say the opposite. I think this draft is all about depth. I mean, there's no Luka, there's no Zion here. But I mean, it's like, when's the last time that you've seen, 3 or 4 different guys ranked at number 1 in a draft? Because I've seen Anthony Edwards, Wiseman, LaMelo, and Killian Hayes all listed at the top of different big boards. So yeah, there's really great depth here. And I mean, all the 3 main guys, Edwards, LaMelo, and Wiseman at the top certainly have their very real flaws. And so, it's interesting. I do think you would have to assume those 3 guys will at least be the top 4. But yeah, I really think anything can happen, especially if Golden State trades out of that 2 spot, or if Minnesota trades out of the 1. It sounds like Minnesota is like still aggressively looking for buyers, but I don't know if they're going to find one. But yeah, I mean, I kind of see this as a depth draft. I think that I don't even know if I would say it's a weak one, because I mean, certainly as I said, there's no star here, or at least no like surefire star. But I think picks from like 5 to 15, there's a lot of really good stuff to be found. So yeah, I'm a little higher on this draft, I think, than a lot of people are.
Dan, so what happens a lot is, and this, through covering and watching the sport, March Madness happens. People get they get more connected to players. Players' stock rises the deeper they play. Typically, not in every case. Yeah. How do you feel the no March Madness will ultimately wind up affecting not players' careers, but kind of the next couple of weeks or draft night?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting you say that, because like the top 3 guys that we were talking about, none of them would have played in March Madness anyways. Edwards, Wiseman, and LaMelo, because Wiseman and LaMelo weren't even playing in college, and Edwards, Georgia probably wouldn't have made it. So at least I don't think they would have. So yeah, it's interesting. I think it helped those guys in a sense, because you always have the risers in March Madness. And so I mean, like the one guy in particular that I really wanted to see was Obi Toppin, who I think is arguably the best offensive player in this draft. I think he's terrific. And so, yeah, and he's playing for Dayton, so he really didn't have many chances. Like against Kansas at the Maui was really his best chance to show himself on a national stage. But that was so early in the season too. I mean, Dayton was, I think, 29-2 when the season was suspended. They were probably going to be a 1 seed. So someone like that you can really, have them rise up. I mean, like last year, you think about Jarrett Culver, a guy who most people didn't even really know who he was until March Madness, and then he really went on that run and and turned into a top 6 pick. So yeah, I mean, it adds to this draft was already really bizarre, and there's a lot of speculation happening, and that's just going to add to it. But that's the world we live in, so we'll see what happens.
Dan, one of the interesting things you mentioned is that you said this was a depth draft, and I think this is going to be a really interesting case study for some of these players that did elect to kind of take that year away from high school and go overseas. Everyone knows about what LaMelo Ball did, but there's another player that's going to be around that 14 to 16 range, and he might be maybe in the 14 to 18 range, and that's RJ Hampton. RJ Hampton was another highly recruited guy out of high school, ended up choosing between a couple of schools, but ultimately went the New Zealand route. When you look at a guy like RJ Hampton, how much stock are teams putting in the fact that they didn't even get to see him at a college level, and how much maybe is it difficult for them to evaluate him based on the level of competition that he played against this past year?
Sure. I mean, it's definitely tough. I mean, I think the NBL, from everything I've heard, is not seen as like the strongest league. And so, yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I think I'm high on RJ Hampton. I don't think he had the greatest showing over there. He wasn't playing on a very good team. He wasn't getting a lot of minutes. But I think that's when you really gotta just look at the intangibles and look at the skills on screen. You see, because it's hard. It's hard. I mean, even if you think at the college level, I mean, guys are playing different levels of competition, different conferences, play different styles of basketball, and so I think really you got to just sort of lean on the intangibles you see, like the skills you see on screen, rather than the matchups so much. So it's something that even if you look at a guy like Edwards at the one spot, I mean, like he's playing in such a bizarre situation where it reminded me a lot of Ben Simmons at LSU, where he's not surrounded by great talent, and it's almost just like an audition for him. And so even guys like at the one spot, there's all these questions you got to answer about him. So I think that can apply to all teams, even the teams at the top.
Hey Dan, so your top three. Who's in your top three, and do you think the Warriors are going to be keeping that second pick?
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, my own personal top three.
Yep.
Yeah. So my top three would have to be Killian Hayes at number one. I think is the best player in this draft. I think the way he controls pace and the way he uses his body, uses space, gets to his spots, it's just so rare for a kid who's 18, especially at point guard. And so he would be my number one guy. I think he's just terrific. And then at two, I would probably have Abdia, who I think, I don't know. I mean, I don't have any intel on what Golden State's going to do. If they do keep the pick, I think Abdia would be the pick for them. Just because I think he combines the high ceiling and high floor aspects really well, where he's going to be able to step in right away and contribute for Golden State. And he passes exceptionally well. His game really pops in transition. He has such a modern game in the way that you can put him at any 2 through 4. And he just really sees the floor. He's going to be a secondary playmaker. And so, yeah, I like him there. And then I would probably have Edwards at 3. Edwards, Toppin, and Hayes would be my top 3, I think. And then Avdia right there as well. So those 4 guys would make up the top 4 for me. And so you mentioned Golden State. I mean, like so many people are talking about Wiseman, and I think Wiseman has a lot of skills, a lot of potential. The thing for me is like the question the Warriors have to answer is: are they building the best team they can build for themselves, or are they building the team that can beat the Lakers? Because that's who's sitting right there that they're going to have to go through. The thing for me that I think is sort of a flawed concept of this is if the Warriors look at the roster and it's not reasonable to expect Draymond to be the guy who's matching up against Anthony Davis or Nikola Jokic. He's just not that athlete anymore. So the Warriors look at their roster and they say, okay, we don't have a guy who can match up against Anthony Davis. Is Wiseman, who is essentially a high schooler, is he that guy? Because I don't think he is. And so we haven't seen Wiseman play anyone pretty much ever who can match up with him physically. He really is he has not played any meaningful minutes beyond high school. And so I think it's no disrespect to him. I think he has a lot of potential. I think he could be really good. For Golden State, I think if you're looking for someone to step in immediately and be that guy to bridge the gap between you and the contenders, I don't think that's Wiseman. I just think there's too much for him to learn. And even as a rim protector, I have my doubts. He's really jumpy. His positioning isn't great. And so I just think, understandably so, for a kid who's only played 3 games beyond high school, 2 of them against mid-major competition, he's not ready to step in and be an important contributor for a team with finals aspirations. And it's rare a kid in his position would be. And so Avdia for me would be the pick at 2 for Golden State, I think.
Daniel, tell me about LaMelo Ball. This is a kid that we've heard a lot about, really since Lonzo was coming out of UCLA. They were still talking about him even then. He plays overseas, but is the hype for real when it comes to LaMelo?
LaMelo is kind of one of those players who, when I'm watching him, I'm grateful that I'm an observer and my professional aspirations are not hinging on whether I'm right about him or not. He just scares the hell out of me. I mean, he's probably it's him or Edwards who's the most talented player in the draft. I think the passing is every bit as good as everyone says it is. He is just an absolute wizard with the ball in his hands. He passes like Luka does. He has every pass. He sees everyone. The thing for me that really I worry about with LaMelo is if you think about the best passers in the NBA, like the Lukas, the Ben Simmons, the LeBron types, those are guys who are talented enough off the dribble or athletic enough or however they generate their offense. They are guys who you can put the ball in their hands and say, control the entire pace of the game. And so like LaMelo has been able to do that, but for LaMelo's game really to stick, I think he has to be the guy who's controlling the whole game. And I don't think it's really realistic to expect that of him at the NBA level. I don't think he's the athlete or the shooter you need to be to do that. And so like my concern with him is like, I don't know what it looks like when LaMelo is the third best player on a team. We've never seen that before. He's never not been the best player on a team. He's also never been on a team that isn't like centered around him. And so I'm not really going to like speculate on his personality and his willingness to or ability to do that or not. But just looking at the basketball player, I think for LaMelo's game to translate, he really has to have like a Harden, Luka-esque, just like firm grasp on everything happening on the court. I'm not really sure he can do that in the NBA level. And so like, I don't know. I mean, I think his passing is probably the best skill in the draft. It is really spectacular. So I think like no matter what, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. Part of me hopes he ends up in Golden State and just sees what happens, because that would just be a blast. But I don't know. I have my doubts, but at the same time, I could be dead wrong. I think the range on LaMelo is just enormous. Like he could be a perennial all-star, or I also think he could not even stick in a starting lineup if things don't go well. So yeah.
And then you had a good observation on Wiseman. Could he match up against an AD? And I'm like, perhaps not. Yeah. But I was curious to get your thought on this. So normally the draft is in late June, and then the season doesn't start until 4 months later. Now it's basically 4 weeks. And so how would you imagine, or how could you see guys who haven't played in a really long time, relatively speaking, now having this condensed crunch? Like, what do you think the impact of rookies will be this season?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think it'll probably depend on, like on the team from like a team by team basis, how they want to integrate their guys. And it obviously depends on the players too. I mean, some are more advanced than others. That's again, like just to harp back on Abdi, like why I really like him is because I think he will be able to step in. He's played at a high level internationally, and I think he'll be able to step in right away and contribute. But sort of besides the point, I mean, if you look at a guy like Wiseman, I mean, the sort of like line I've been reading about him is like, you expect him to be sort of like a rim runner and a rim protector first, and then hopefully the offense will come later on in his rookie season in his career. So I mean, like, I'm not in talent development. I don't work for a basketball team. So I mean, like, you'd hope that guys can be integrated slowly but surely and sort of catch up from the missed time or the time they've missed. But yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the player and the team and how they want to do things. So, I mean, if you look at a team like the Pistons, for example, I mean, they're not really in any position to compete. They're in the East where, like they're playing inferior talent a lot of the time. And so you can sort of just let guys go and see what you have. Whereas like Golden State certainly does not have that luxury. Minnesota with the clock ticking on Towns does not have that luxury. Atlanta does not have that luxury. So some teams need contributions right away. And so I have to imagine that'll factor heavily into the decisions that these teams are making.
Daniel, one of the things I keep thinking about is NBA draft night is so exciting for so many different reasons, most notably because of the trades that do occur, or the trades that aren't fully consummated on draft night, right? Like you get the hat, but you don't necessarily know which team they're going to. Yeah. There's been a lot of talk this year about teams that might be eyeing one of those top 3 spots. You mentioned it earlier. Does Minnesota keep pick number 1? Will Golden State keep pick number 2? One team that's going to stay in that top 3 is going to be Charlotte. What does Charlotte need to do in this draft? How do they look at their roster? And then kind of a secondary question, what other teams might jump up from the mid-lottery and try and get back into the top 5?
Sure. Well, I mean, just to speak on Charlotte first, I think with them, it's, it's certainly got to be best player available. So, I mean, if they feel that's Wiseman, if he drops to them, I think it should be him. If it's LaMelo, it should be him. I think for them, like my thought on Charlotte is, so like one of my hesitations on Wiseman is I just don't think Wiseman is the type of player you can build a true championship team around in today's NBA because he doesn't pass very well. The spacing, at least not yet, isn't there. I don't really think that's a problem that Charlotte needs to worry about. I mean, like a team like Charlotte is so far off and like historically has been far off for a long time that like I don't think you're building your team with specific championship aspirations in mind. You're just trying to build a competitive basketball team right now if you're Charlotte. And so like guys like Devontae Graham and Terry Rozier, I mean, they're not like bad. They're not bad players. They can play and they can help you win, but you're not selecting at the 3rd overall pick with those guys in mind. So, I mean, if they think it's LaMelo, if he's their guy at 3 and he's there, they should pick him. It doesn't really matter if Devontae Graham is there or Terry Rozier is there because, they might not be there in 2 years. So, like, for me, I think it's really just best player available at 3 with Charlotte. And, who they think that is, I don't have the intel on that. But and then you asked about teams trading up from the mid-lottery. I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, A trade that I had seen mocked a lot was Oubre in the 10th pick for the second pick in the mid-level exception with Golden State, which obviously isn't happening now because Oubre is apparently going to OKC. So I really don't know. I mean, with drafts like this, it reminds me of 2013 where everyone was speculating on who, like the Cavs wanted to trade down, you know, and like the XYZ wants Oladipo and the Cavs were going to trade down. But, you know, in a draft that isn't, you know, very strong at the top, like someone's got to want that pick. And so I've seen plenty of rumors about teams wanting to trade down. I have yet to see the rumor about the team that really wants to trade up. So, I mean, you obviously need both sides to complete that deal.
And if you want to check out the full version of Catch and Shoot 2.0, if you want to hear a little bit more about the NBA draft, free agency, and trades that are being consummated this week, check out the full version. It's courtesy of Pure Hoops Media.